Welcome back to Legal Face Off on WGN. It's time for the legal grab bag. We have the pleasure of being joined once again by Rachel Fiset, co-founder and managing partner of ZFZ LLP. I've seen her pop up on News Nation, the BBC, and other places. Thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
And we have Simon Kashishan, a licensed attorney in Washington, D.C. and Texas, and the vice president of risk management at Red Bull. Simon, thanks so much.
Thank you for having me.
Simon, how many Red Bulls so far today?
Today, none, because I'm not in the office. The office is where the Red Bull is at, not in my house.
All right. Well, you'll both be happy to know that for your episode, Trump Watch is back in the top spot after a brief hiatus. This is where Rich purges all the Trump legal issues from the last time we talked. Rich, where are we going today? Arlington cemetery photos, hush money sentencing, DC election fraud case. Where are you taking this thing?
Yeah, those are all good. I mean, the Arlington is still growing. I mean, there might be criminal charges, although I think the woman who was allegedly assaulted said she's not pursuing it. But the big story legally this week is that, Jack Smith filed a superseding indictment on the election fraud charges. In which Tina, listen, Jack Smith is a smart guy, lots of resources, but basically just whited out the name president and put in candidate many times, which, of course, he had to do to meet the Supreme Court decision that ruled back in July that presidents have immunity for official acts. So what Jack Smith did here is he took out anything that could be deemed as an official act by the president, and anything that was an act by someone running for president, which several allegations in this superseding indictment mean that he wasn't acting in official capacity. Therefore, he is not immune from prosecution. This was expected, of course, as soon as the Supreme Court ruled in that 6-3 decision. Of course, Trump has now moved for a continuance. He wants this, as we've talked about extensively, to be delayed until after the election. Of course, if he is elected president, he will likely fire Jack Smith and not pursue this case at all, obviously. But what are your thoughts on this new superseding indictment?
As you said, Rich, it was to be expected. I'm envisioning, Jack Smith sitting there with a bottle of whiteout for those of us who are old enough to remember that, before computers became the way to do things. I think that Trump's going to find a way to, skirt past this, whether it's getting a continuance or whatnot. And my guess is that he will leverage this, as he often does, into the narrative, that he's being wrongfully persecuted. So I don't hold out any real hope that this is going to go in a meaningful direction, especially before the election.
Rachel, do you think that the Supreme Court decision was at least crafted, even though it was written by a conservative majority, do you think it was written in a way that gave Jack Smith a blueprint to write the superseding indictment the way he wrote it?
I don't think it was written in a way to give him a blueprint, but I do think that the Supreme Court had to stop short of saying any actions during a presidency cannot be criminal. And so that's what Jack Smith has kind of glommed onto, and he's holding on to the fact that as a candidate, you are not acting in your presidential capacity. The shorter the indictment is here, and the reason it's shorter is because they've taken out all of those DOJ acts and the conspiracy that was alleged between Jeffrey Clark at the DOJ and Trump, because that would lead the court to believe that that was acting as president in an official capacity. But as a candidate running for president, you certainly can commit crimes. So it is interesting that he is attempting to skirt around this, and we'll have to see what happens. But I agree with Tina. It'll be nothing until after the election.
Yeah, Simon, I mean, listen, this is a new indictment, so that results in new legal issues, new legal challenges, very importantly, that will, of course, ultimately make its way to the Supreme Court. None of that will be done before there is a new president elected in November, right? Any chance that there will be?
No, I mean, when we talk about going through the federal court system, my recollection, not that I practice a lot of criminal law and I'm not really involved in the space, I don't remember it ever being a quick process. And it really does open up the door to Trump's legal team to challenge the details through many of the different levels. And so there's really no chance it's ever going to see the light of day before the November election. However, it's really interesting to see what will happen. I think, depending on the outcome of the election, we might see this continue on, or it might just sort of die, like you sort of referenced, because there's a good chance that somebody will get fired very quickly.
Anyone thinks it moves the needle politically? I mean, is any voter out there who was undecided, that small sliver of people that might be undecided, look at this and say, wow, I'm now convinced that I'm going to vote for Kamala over Trump? There's no way, right?
No, I don't think so. I think the narrative for those people that are Trump supporters is going to be that, he's being singled out, and this is the usual lawyering that takes place where somebody just basically, we talk about White House, drops off a couple of pages of the indictment and does whatever they can to try to stick it to him again. On the other hand, this is sort of the card that he was dealt, and he had to sort of retune the pleadings in order to be able to move forward with the case. And so this is what good lawyering is about. It's also what a lot of times the general public feels that makes lawyers sort of not nice people, because we're always looking for the angles. And so this is probably not going to change anybody's mind.
Moving along, your LFO word of the day is demure. It means reserved, modest, shy. It's an adjective. It's popular among the cool kids. And Tina, a cool kid who coined the phrase on TikTok, now knows what the word trademarking means as well.
So Ryan, Jules LeBron, who is a well-known TikTok influencer with over 2 million followers, has become best known for her advice on exactly what you just said, how to be demure, mindful, and cutesy. She became an overnight sensation with many well-known celebrities and brands working with her on sponsored content and promoting this phrase. But as we've seen often on Legal Face Off, along with fame and fortune comes some sort of a legal dispute, this time a trademark dispute, because it looks like someone else, that's someone being Jefferson Bates, has beat Jules to filing for trademarking the phrase very demure, very mindful, in what appears to be an attempt to cash in on LeBron's success. So in comes the founder of the social media platform Hive Social to try to help the situation by filing a trademark application for very demure, very cutesy, which she says she'll assign to LeBron as the rightful owner of the phrase. Being a trademark lawyer myself, I'm not really quite sure how that helps the situation. There are a bunch of people coming out of the woodwork here trying to advise LeBron on what to do. As a trademark lawyer, I can advise her that if I were her, I'd first start by making sure that she's not infringing anybody else's rights by using cutesy and demure, because it's one thing to use them in conversation and it's another to use them on merchandise and a brand. Assuming she's not infringing on anyone else's right, she should really start thinking about going after others who are trying to capitalize off her brand. I did a little bit of sleuthing here on Jefferson Bates, and it looks like he's filed some other trademark applications in the past, Rich, trying to do the same thing that he's doing here. For example, he's tried to get a trademark registration for the phrase "Go Broncos, let's ride," which got rejected. So this shows what could very well be bad faith here. And so I would tell LeBron to go ahead and start with a cease and desist letter, look into objecting to the application that's been filed with the trademark office, and potentially look at suing if those are not satisfactory remedies, Rich. I like your cutesy link off, by the way.
Yeah, it's not as good as Simon's, but I'm
I would say something, but I'm being demure. I'm not going to say anything.
I mean, 10 million views. Like, what are we doing wrong as a podcast? We gotta. Here's what I'm coming up with. I looked at some synonyms for these words, and I'm gonna now put out there that my new catchphrase is I'm being prissy and diffident. Prissy and diffident is the new one. We're going with prissy and diffident. Tina, no trademark for me, and let's spread the word.
I do insurance work a lot of times, Rich, and I just like my favorite one is well, I'll come back to you. I'm off topic.
Rachel, what do you think of this? I mean, should the question is, and it's a really interesting legal question. Should the first to trademark or first to use be the one that profits off demure and cutesy?
First to use should be the one that profits. The fact that she claims she didn't really know what she was doing here. She just came up with this. It was a sensation. That's how our days are working now with YouTubers and what catches on. We'll see how prissy and diffident does. But I think first to use, she has a very strong basis. A cease and desist should put him on notice, and then she can go on. So the whole point of intellectual property law is to reward the people that came up with the intellectual property. And so she has the better case, but of course it's going to cost her money. And it's going to be a legal battle, and it just kind of stinks for everybody.
I love the fact that this is now intellectual property. I mean, this ain't exactly Moby Dick, let's face it. But yeah, it's a valuable IP now that this person came up with these two words. Simon?
Well, the upside, I think, is that there's probably more people following the story. And at the end of the day, she's getting more followers. But this serves as a cautionary tale, I guess, for all content creators and highlights sort of the complexities of social media trends and intellectual property law. And this is sort of one of these things when you're still trying to get your come up, it's hard to invest and take steps to protect whatever it is that you're trying to protect. But once you're there, there's other people coming after you. And at the end of the day, it's going to cost money. And I think I think we're all sort of aligned that she'll probably get her rights. But when I do my social media, I too am going to be mindful of, and now I'm going to tell you what my insurance word is, recalcitrance. I'm going to be the Mr. Recalcitrant.
By the way, Simon, I give you kudos for the remarkable organization of that old-fashioned mail sorter over your shoulder there. You have no bill pending, or either that or you're the proprietor of like a 19th century hotel and there's not that many messages.
This is my digital scanner, so I don't use it that often anymore, but it's right here on my desk. It's ready to go at any time. I know you're impressed with my leveraging technology. Moving on.
What are the two things on either end of that letter thing? Is that those are pending bills you just don't want to deal with?
No, yeah, those are just things.
Those are legal bills
on the shelf.
No wonder my legal bills aren't getting paid. They're in that
right there. That's your bill right there. That's right next to the certified mail piece from back in the day. I think they're electronic now too. But you never.
Who's your abacus?
Wait, hold on. I'll be back.
Rachel, I like your flowers, by the way, and you've got a good setup as well. You're on point with everything. Let's move along here. Well, in Nevada, a politician's now accused of killing a journalist, and what happens in Vegas doesn't stay in Vegas. Rich, this is grabbing some national headlines.
Well, not accused, convicted, and sentenced to life. By the way, I was impressed, Rachel, with how quickly the sentencing was done. Usually there's a period of a couple months. I mean, this guy was convicted on Wednesday and I believe sentenced to life on Thursday. They don't mess around in Nevada. Not a lot of time. Not a lot of time for contemplation or impact statements. But yeah, this is a high-profile case. This was a local politician in Vegas who was now, as I said, convicted of murdering a journalist from the local newspaper in Vegas who had uncovered, he had written articles that exposed this person of harassment and misconduct. And then he was murdered by this elected official. The trial lasted 2 weeks. Among the evidence, Tina, that the jurors were convinced by was lots of DNA. There was this famous straw hat that a perpetrator was seen on video wearing as he left the house. Just turns out that this individual who was convicted had a similar straw hat that was a really noticeable hat cut up in his house. And most notably from my perspective, there was video of this guy, the murderer, getting into his garage with cameras all around, by the way, wearing a full white jumpsuit, like a Breaking Bad style jumpsuit. You know, we've covered some dumb criminals in the past, but maybe don't wear the Heisenberg, suit if you're walking in front of a group of reporters after you just killed someone. But yes, like I said, sentenced to life, and up until the end, he was saying his defense was that this was a frame job. He was framed.
I mean, this is crazy. I mean, as you've said, we've covered some crazy stories on this show, but there are so many missteps here, especially if the ultimate objective is to successfully kill somebody. I mean, it was just outrageous. And living in an internet world, living in a world where people have cameras everywhere all the time that are rolling 24/7, it's just preposterous.
Yeah, Simon, the idea that, these articles that were, of course, damaging, but that would lead to someone stalking and killing the reporter, I mean, that blows your mind.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what a Democratic administrator does in Clark County, but I'm pretty sure I wouldn't kill for that job. I will just say that.
Yeah, Rachel, what are your thoughts on this one?
I think it's terribly sad, and it's all amateur. So it sounds like he was he was running his office incompetently, and that was coming out. And for some reason, he thought killing the reporter who had published stories on him would go unnoticed. I mean, in the kind of blatant manner that this all went down. It's horribly sad that someone was murdered doing their job, working for the people, and that's the truth. And it's even sadder that it's an official that's doing this.
You don't want to blame politics too much, but look, I mean, the narrative here fits in with the attacking of the press that we've seen over the last decade or so. You can't think of this story without knowing that, right? The press, the media, who do incredible work. Many of the things that we enjoy these days wouldn't be around without freedom of the press, and the attack on the press by many, including, of course, Trump for 4 years and continues, leads to this culture, in my opinion. So I agree with you.
Yeah, I agree, and it's not something we, until recent years, have thought of as much at the forefront of being part of our fabric, whereas you do think of this happening in other countries. So this is where we are right now, but it is horribly sad. It feels like such a waste of a life.
All right, digging deeper into the bag, cyber squatting can lead to big bucks if you're patient enough. Tina, tell us about this New York trademark lawyer who hit it big in the 2024 election.
Ryan, as a trademark lawyer, I cannot say that I encourage anybody to become a cyber squatter, but this trademark lawyer fancies himself as the best political cyber squatter ever. So Jeremy Green Esch buys and sells domain names when he isn't practicing law, and just sold the domain name harriswaltz.com to a supporter of Vice President Kamala Harris for $15,000. So this Harris reporter who bought the domain name was a man who prefers not to be identified, who bought it because he didn't want the Trump campaign to buy the domain name. The website currently redirects visitors to Kamala Harris's website. So Jeremy initially paid only $8.99 for this domain back in 2020. He apparently bought 15 variations of Kamala Harris domain names, combining Harris's name with what he called every sort of folksy white man he could think of who was big at the time. So he apparently now owns about 60 domains that include both Democratic and Republican potential candidates, including a bunch of Gretchen Whitmer domains who he thinks has a pretty good chance in 2028. He has a track record of success, or at least success by his standards. Back in 2016, he sold the ClintonKane.com domain name for $15,000 to an anonymous buyer who apparently turned out to be a campaign worker for former President Donald Trump. That domain ended up being used to point to a website to post negative news about the Democratic candidates. He apparently sells domain names through his marketplace that he created for registered trademarks called Communer. For what it's worth, you listeners out there, don't try this at home. What Esh is doing can easily fall into the breaking the law territory. There is such a thing as a federal law known as the ACPA, which is the Anti-Cyber Squatting Consumer Protection Act, that makes this practice known as cyber squatting illegal. So just because someone doesn't take you to court doesn't mean that they can't take you to court. So again, I mean, Rich, this is just another one of those crazy stories of, people doing crazy things. I would not do this in a million years, especially as a trademark lawyer.
I feel like the domain names that didn't quite pan out, like, Harris Whitmer or Harris Newsom, they should be donated to developing countries. Like, you give the hat, the Super Bowl loser hat that was made, like, there's somewhere where people are wearing Buffalo Bills Super Bowl winner hats. You should donate these domain names to them. But yeah, I mean, don't break the law. But on the other hand, it's pretty entrepreneurial. It's a pretty good return. $8, 15 grand, Rachel.
Pretty good return. I don't know how long he had to research every feasible white Midwestern male, but it sounds like he took the time to do it. It sounds like this guy has some hobbies that he's pretty excited about when they pay off. So the only thing I can say on this, which kind of harkens back to cutesy and demure, is this is somebody profiting again off of other people's kind of hard work. So in the case of Clinton Kane, he sells that to a Trump supporter. Like that's terrible. And then they use that domain name against them. And I think that's not how this is meant to play out. But again, people are creative in thinking of how they can buy and sell intellectual property or ideas or, other things that are out there, less tangible.
Would be interesting to know how many combinations he bought, Whitmer's, Buttigieg, Newsom, Pritzker, whatever, to get to that point to hit the jackpot on this one, I guess. Well, we've been following this just horrible story out of Italy of the capsized yacht that killed 7 people, including some pretty high profile people in the tech, finance industries. It happened in the middle of some severe weather. And Tina, now it sounds like a legal storm is brewing for the captain.
This is just a horrible story. The most recent developments are that there are now 3 members of the crew, including the captain, who are under investigation for manslaughter after 7 people were killed when the WGN super yacht sank in a storm while anchored off the coast of Sicily on August 19. The storm was suspected to be potentially a downspout. British technology tycoon Mike Lynch, his daughter Hannah, and 5 others were killed, including the yacht's chef, the Morgan Stanley International Chairman Jonathan Bloomer and his wife. Clifford Chance lawyer Chris Morvillo and his wife were also killed. This 184-foot yacht capsized and sank within minutes. The trip was intended to be a celebration after Lynch was acquitted in a decades-long $11 billion fraud case. So the boat's captain, James Cutfield, was put under investigation earlier this week for manslaughter and shipwreck. He's chosen to remain silent in the wake of prosecutor and press inquiries. A couple of days ago, it was reported that ship engineer Tim Parker Eaton and sailor Matthew Griffith are also being investigated for the same crimes. Parker Eaton is suspected of having failed to protect the yacht's engine room and operating systems, while Griffith was on watch duty the night of the incident. Naval marine experts say that they find this tragedy very puzzling. Unfortunately, they say vessels like this, built by the Italian high-end yacht manufacturer Perini, are considered unsinkable. We know other boats in history, including the Titanic, were called unsinkable. But these experts do say that this yacht should have withstood the storm, or at least not sunk as quickly as it did. The chief prosecutor on this said his team is going to consider each possible element of responsibility, including the captain, the crew, and individuals who are in charge of supervision in the yacht's manufacturer. They first have to salvage the wreck, which is about 170 feet down, Rich.
Yeah, I mean, from a legal perspective, it's really interesting. This was, by all accounts, a freak storm, like a once in a lifetime type of storm. There's been some allegations that I was reading about today that the crew was partying. There might have been some drinking involved earlier. But, obviously the defense will be that this was out of their control, right? That they can't be responsible for an act of God like this. They are responsible for certain types of weather, obviously ones you can predict, but they will argue that this was beyond that. Now, to the extent that the prosecutors and ultimately civilly, because there'll be lots of civil lawsuits coming from this, to the extent that they can prove that they should have anticipated this and acted differently. Even though you can't anticipate it, the argument will be, once the storm hit, how did you act? That's really the key. I don't know. We know that from, prior cases with Italy. The legal system's certainly different. I don't think that people enjoy the same types of freedoms that they do in our system to that extent. So we'll see, but lots of criminal charges, I think, that will be brought, especially, Simon, given the high-profile nature of the decedents. We just talked to an expert who pointed out that in the Matthew Perry case, the reason the prosecutors are bringing that case is because of the fame and notoriety of Matthew Perry. Similarly, you would think that a country that relies on tourism and that has a very robust sailing community and boating community would seek to prosecute this, partially because of the high profile nature of it and the people involved.
Sorry, I was researching Folksy White Man for a domain, so I could see if I could register that. What was the question? No kidding.
Yeah, I mean, I think that these lawsuits, you deal a lot with notice, right? And this is a question of whether the parties should be held liable, both criminally and civilly, for what amounts to, it seems like, a once in a lifetime freak storm.
For sure, this is politicized, and there's no question in my mind the Italian authorities are going to prosecute this. The thing that I think that I look at, and as you know, I do a lot of insurance related stuff and civil matters. One of the things that I think has come up time and again, notwithstanding the fact that this might have been an act of God or a once in a lifetime storm, is that they should have had time to rescue. And the question as to whether they were potentially partying or there was something else going on or they didn't have adequate measures in place, I think the negligent rescue or the negligent respond to the incident is really what's going to carry the day in the civil claim. And although I'm not as familiar with Italian laws, I'm sure that there will be suits filed all over the place, especially if there was I think there were UK citizens and so on and so forth. So I suspect that would be the focus of the civil case. In terms of the criminal one, the interesting thing about this is I think the yacht owner is the one that's responsible for removing the wreckage from the floor of the ocean. And so it's not something that the Italian authorities are going to do. And so the cost associated with that, according to maritime law, is on the owner. And so that is something that may or may not take place in due course, and I think there's more to come.
All right, moving along to the next topic. This is the biggest nightmare for anyone with a teenager. An 18-year-old was killed in Michigan after his friend crashed the car they were in. They were doing over 100 miles an hour. Now the mom of the dead teenager is suing the mom of the driver. Rich, explain this one for us.
Interesting. We've covered and we've seen a trend legally of not just the perpetrators of crime, like in this case, and like in many school shootings that we've seen, being prosecuted and also being pursued civilly. The trend is that the parents of these individuals are also being pursued, and successfully. Lately, we saw in the Crumbly case, Tina, where James and Jennifer Crumbly, the parents of Ethan Crumbly, who shot up and killed 4 students in Oxford, Michigan, they were found guilty and sentenced to 10 years in prison because the jury found that they could have prevented the shooting by, doing several things differently. Similarly, in this case, the allegation is that just like handing your child a gun or not supervising the gun. They handed this troubled individual, and there's lots of evidence that he was really troubled. They handed him a lethal weapon in a high-speed car. And that resulted in him driving that car at an incredibly unsafe speed and killing this individual. So I think it has a lot of legs. I think it's something that should be pursued. Again, there's lots of evidence that his mom was texting her son, not while he was driving, but texting him after following him on the app and saying, slow down, you're out of control, like literally saying words, slow the F down right now. He had been driving 123 in their Audi. She bought herself a BMW that could go 177 miles per hour, right? So if I'm the attorney, if I'm the prosecutor, I'm telling the jury there's this culture of speeding that the mom and the parents were just supporting. So I think it's an easier case than many of the school shooting cases, actually. So I think there's a lot of merit to it, actually.
Agree with you, Rich, that when you look at the evidence, at least in the Crumley case, with respect to, everything that happened there, I think the evidence here really leads a lot more directly to the ultimate tragedy that occurred by virtue of the fact that the parents who was on notice, it seemed like this kid was upping the ante every time he got behind the wheel. And his mother, it sounds like, was a witness to this, knew that he was dangerous, asked him to slow down, presumably because she realized that he was a danger, but she didn't do anything to keep the keys away from him or the car away from him. And so I agree with you that in at least certain ways, this case appears to have more legs than the school shootings.
Rachel, you want to take the opposite perspective, that this is if they do charge him, this is prosecutorial overreach, and that this is really seeking other people responsible for what is in essence an individual who caused this person's death?
Yeah, so I think in a civil case, it definitely has legs. I think this is something a jury can get behind, and I think the evidence is going to be lengthy. Even what's already come out is lengthy. The parents knew 16-year-old boy. He had a lot of basic issues, both with his mom. He'd been, they'd called domestic violence for actions he'd committed against his mom. This was, for lack of a better term, like an out of control kid that seems incredibly entitled, incredibly spoiled, and had incredible access to dangerous activities, including speed driving. So I think civilly, this case could work. I think beyond a reasonable doubt, if it's charged criminally, I think it's much more difficult to show than even a school shooting case, because giving somebody a car is different than giving somebody a gun. When you think of criminal activity, allowing access to a gun, guns have essentially one purpose, and that is to shoot, and they are always lethal. A car is not for the purpose of an inherently dangerous activity. So I think that's where it will turn as far as any kind of criminal liability. It may turn there as far as civil liability, but I think that there can be a very compelling argument made that it's more likely than not that the parents should be at fault for this.
Simon, any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, look, from a civil standpoint, I think it's pretty straightforward. The kid was probably insured under the policy anyway, and so if they have excess, the insurance company is going to be involved. From the parents' perspective, the argument is not only did they give the instrumentality that gave rise to the injury, which was this super fast car, but they also, one of the things in the article, I think, referred to them having a Subaru in the garage as well, and she gave him access to the BMW that goes 177 miles an hour. I don't know that it would make that much of a difference, but the allegations, other than the kid being an insured himself, is obviously derivative negligence on the part of the mother, potentially negligent supervision, negligent entrustment, all these types of derivative negligence claims. But I think there are some defenses that can be raised, both if this is being prosecuted criminally and or in the civil case. It's not like she wasn't monitoring this kid's behavior. She had GPS tracking on him. She was checking his speed. She was telling him not to speed, and she was trying to assert control over him. Now, whether hiding the keys would have worked or not, there's probably more facts. But this is a messy one. I think, again, it's a pretty straight forward argument in the civil arena. Not sure whether or not, for the same reasons, the criminal action, if it were to be presented by a prosecutor, would be successful.
All right, two pretty heavy stories there. Let's go a little lighter. I didn't know that J-Lo was using Ben Affleck's name when they got married, but Rich, I guess that doesn't matter anymore, does it?
Yeah, the one thing that she is asking for in their split is to have her name back. Considerable assets on both sides, obviously. They acquired some of that in the 2 or 3 years they were married. So under California law, as our guest knows, that is split. But the one thing that will not be split anymore is their name, Tina, and she'll go back to being the famed J-Lo, Jenny from the Block. Are you devastated by the breakup, and do you support dropping Affleck in favor of Lopez?
Well, I mean, I think that she absolutely should drop his name, especially because they're not going to be together anymore and they weren't married all that long. And I think it's a very personal decision, Rich. I have many of my friends who kept their maiden names. I mean, I kept my maiden name. I've got other friends who gotten married, and depending on how long they were married, even if it ended up in divorce, they've still kept their husband's name, or their ex-husband's name. So I think it's a very personal thing. And as for the relationship, I am sad for them because it was quite the story to have been together like over 20 years ago, to have broken up, to have had separate lives, essentially, children with other folks, and then to come back together. It was a very fairy tale narrative. And it's sad because, it sounds like, from at least what I've read, that she didn't want to get divorced, but it's one of those things, Rich, where I think we're all old enough to know that it's hard for people to change, especially when you get to a certain age. So, to think that someone's going to change at this stage in the game, if that's what you're looking for, the likelihood that, you will end up getting what you want, and if it's dependent on that person changing, it's probably pretty unlikely it's going to happen.
Now, Rachel, I think Affleck's already moved on. There's rumors that he's dating a Kennedy, I think the daughter of RFK Jr. But we're gonna end off our segment here with asking you and Simon and then the rest. This is, many people's favorite celebrity couple. Do you have an all-time favorite celebrity couple that is not hyphenated as Ben Lowe? Now, what was there? They were Jen. What were they again? Jennifer, correct. What celebrity couple is your all-time favorite? Start with you, Rachel.
Steffi Graf and Andre Agassi. They are my favorite.
Good power couple right there. Still together or no? I think they're still together.
Still together. Their kids are not tennis players. I think they are star athletes in any other sport they've chosen, but kind of under the radar, do a lot of charity work. And I've always liked both of them as tennis players, being a former tennis player myself. So
by Agassi. Ryan Burrow, favorites, all-time celeb couple, and feel free to abbreviate them if you'd like.
I have to tell you, I think right now at this moment, Dansby and Mallory Swanson.
You might explain that to our non-Cub fan who they are.
Oh, okay. Shortstop for the Chicago Cubs and striker for the Team USA women's gold medal winning soccer team.
Yes, and Swanson did not travel to Paris to see her win because he's that devoted a baseball player. That's true. All right, that's a good one. Kashishian. Now, by the way, you've got a name that I would drop in a second. I know you're happily married, but for Christ's sake, come on.
Once or twice I was mixed up with Kardashian when somebody was trying to spell my name, and that didn't really, once they looked up, they were not impressed with who was presented to them. I'm not really following a lot of celebrity couples, but I do like Jay-Z and Beyonce, so I'll make up one. Jay-Zonce is what I'm going with.
Not so
No,
really.
nothing.
Maybe the most, I mean, they got to be the richest power couple of all time, right? Maybe Prince Harry and Meghan surpass them, but I don't know. I think Beyonce and
They're doing okay. They're doing all right.
Tina, favorite celeb couple of all time.
I have two. I'm happy to share both, but the first one that comes to mind is Tom Hanks and Rita Wilson.
Oh, what movie did they meet on?
I know that I don't remember, they were together in Sleepless in Seattle, but I think they were together before that.
Volunteers. Little known.
Wow, what year was that?
It was like early Hanks. All right, who's the second one?
Oh my God, it disappeared. I had it and then it disappeared.
All right, we'll come back.
I'm gonna have to think about that. I had it on the top. Oh, wait a minute. No, I forgot. I'll tell you later.
Who you got?
I like Goldie and Kurt Russell.
Oh, still surviving after all these years. Oh, technically never married, I believe, right?
Yeah.
Oh,
Just
yeah.
partners. My favorite, I mean, I thought Ryan was going to steal mine, but mine's also a Chicago power couple in the athletic space. Ryan, can you guess who I'm talking about?
You're not going Pippen Jordan route, are you?
No, also a gold medalist, Simone Biles and Owens from the Bears, who did, by the way, leave training camp, as we saw on Hard Knocks, to go visit Simone Biles, the GOAT gymnast in Paris. So he supported her. So who knows? Maybe Swanson will no longer be a power couple because he didn't go root on his wife in Paris.
I think they'll.
She remembered my other one, Michael J. Fox and Tracy Pollan.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Sit, Ubu, sit. Good dog.
Good dog. Woof.
All right, let's wrap this up. Thank you so much, Rachel Fiset and Simon Kashishin. If we're going by, Demir Shishin is the name he's going by. This
left out a third of his name, though.
That'll do it for this latest installment of Legal Face Off on WGN. Special thanks to Yale lecturer Joanne Lippman, Harry Nelson from Nelson Hardiman LLP, and David Becker with the executive director and founder of the nonpartisan, not-for-profit Center for Election Innovation and Research. Also shouts out to Ben Anderson and Lisa Stegel. For Tina Martini, Cutesy Lenkoff. Do I have that right? Yeah, Cutesy Lenkoff.
Chrissy and something else. I forget.
I'm Ryan Burrow. Thanks again for joining us on Legal Face Off on WGN.